I'm Wendy Hinman. I'm here at the Wooden Boat Festival. I'm pretty excited to see all these classic boats. I've been coming to the Wooden Boat Festival for a lot of years, and I'm really pleased to be speaking at the boat festival, sharing my story about my sail around the Pacific Ocean with my husband for 7 years on a 31-foot boat. On Friday, I did a talk about voyaging on a small income. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to go voyaging and make it affordable, so that was a pretty great talk. On Saturday, I talked about living without refrigeration. We had a pretty small, simple boat and discovered that it was quite freeing to live without refrigeration. We didn't have to worry about a lot of equipment, and people were pretty excited to hear about how to do that, different ways of preserving food and living without all the extra complications that a refrigeration requires. Today I did a session on keeping your relationship afloat. And in 31 feet for 7 years, we had plenty of tests to our relationship. You know, typhoons and rocks and ships that threatened to turn our home into kindling. And so I guess you could say I put my relationship to the test. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary, so maybe I've learned something, I don't know, and hopefully my lessons have helped a few other people figure out how to manage their relationships in a tiny little space like that. Since the last boat show and the big launch of my book, Tightwads on the Loose, we have been moving into a new house that we bought that has a warehouse in the backyard big enough to build our next big dream, a 38-foot boat that will be the home of our next adventure. My husband's been dreaming about building a boat for his whole life. He sailed around the world with his family, and you could say he did plenty of research. And he looked around and he saw all these horrible boats and said, I could do better than that. So he, after being homeschooled and not actually officially graduating from high school, found a way to get a GED, go to community college, and then transfer to MIT, one of the top schools in the country and one of the few schools that will do a naval architecture degree. He studied naval architecture, and with me we went and did a little bit of what you might call research, a 7-year journey around the Pacific, and I think he knows what kind of boat we want at this point. He's designed it, and when I talked to him last night on the phone, he said he laid the keel yesterday. We've got the stem on, we've got the transom on, we've got the frames laid up, and we will build around that using plywood, get rid of the frames, and it'll have a little bit of a soft chine, kind of inspired by the T-Bird, a sailboat that was designed for the American Plywood Association, and we raced for a lot of years. There's a lot of T-Birds out here, and they're great boats that are still going strong. We discovered that there's a lot to be said for the T-Bird design, and we'll use a little bit of that concept to build a good boat, and a few more modern design ideas to build a fast, light displacement hull that can get us around the globe in style. Our plan is to basically head to Chile and then around the Horn, I guess. I mean, I've already told you I'm crazy, I guess, by telling you I was in a 7 years in a 31-foot boat. Sailing around the Horn is another crazy idea, and probably building a boat is too. But after we build that boat and go around the Horn, we'll probably head to Europe and do the canals of Europe. This boat that we're building has a lifting keel, which means we can sail well in the ocean, and then when we lift the keel we can go into some of these really tight spots in the canals of Europe and maybe the canals down in the Straits of Magellan down in Chile, and then tuck into some really tight spots where we might be able to get away from typhoons or really tough willow winds. Then it also has an unstayed rig. There's a lot of neat designs with unstayed rigs at this point, and the unstayed rig is a really simple design, and so I think it'll save us a little bit of money. It'll be a little bit of an experiment, and this isn't something we can buy, so he's testing his skills as a designer, a naval architect, and as a builder to put together his dream. We bought the farm, yes. we sold our boat and bought the farm. Not exactly, but we we were looking for a place to build this boat, and we looked all over the area of Seattle, which is where we were living, in the old house that we had been renting while we were out sailing. And we just couldn't find anything that was really affordable. So we kept looking for other boats and trying to figure out how we were going to do this. We ended up getting on the internet one day, and there was this house on Bainbridge Island right near the ferry that has a warehouse in the backyard that was big enough to build this boat. It had been on the market for about an hour, and my husband called and he says, "We've got to go see this boat. We've got to go see this house. It's perfect. We just have to check it out." So by the time we got over to see the house, not long after it went on the market, there was already an offer in on the house. By the time we got our offer together, there were 6 other offers. So we got into a bidding war, and we thought, oh no, we've got to win this house, because for most of these other people, they were just looking for a house. We needed the house and the workshop arrangement. And we ended up winning the bid, partially because the house was rented and owned by a bank, a foreclosure. The bank wanted to close in a really short period of time, and we were one of the few people that were able to do that. Also, we were willing to leave the renters in because we weren't quite ready to move at that point. So once we moved in and did a little bit to get this 1920s farmhouse a bit more well insulated and a little bit warmer in the wintertime, we've begun the process of building. And every day we see a little bit more progress. My husband Garth comes home every night, just does a little bit on it, and little by little we make way towards achieving that next goal. We've been toying with different ideas for the name, but we don't have an official name. I think when the boat is done, we'll just know. We'll just know what that name's going to be. Valela told us, and it was perfect. Valela was just the right name for the boat that we went on our 7-year journey. Valela is the little sailor, by the wind sailor. There's these little creatures that you see that look like little jellyfish. They're like a little plane with a vertical plane that just blows with the wind. And that's what our plan was, to just blow with the wind. Also, Vela was the name of his parents' boat, my husband's parents' boat, and they sailed around the world on this boat called the Vela. So Velela was like a little bit of an homage to that boat, the Vela. One of my next writing projects is bringing alive this fabulous story of my husband's sail around the world as a kid. He and his family had a 40-foot double-ender Pinky and set off long before anybody really had this idea of going sailing. There was Hal Roth and a couple of other people, the Pardees, just a few people that were doing this, and only celestial navigation, not much in the way of navigation equipment really at all. And they sailed as far as Fiji, and they ran on a reef, basically sunk the boat on a reef. It had a hole about the size of a Volkswagen, pretty heartbreaking. My husband and his family got to live the life of Robinson Crusoe for a little while until they were taken into the city in Suva in Fiji. And at some point they figured out that they could actually rebuild that boat. So it was quite a story to rebuild their dream and continue on to sail around the world. They did do that. My husband at 14 years old got the opportunity to rebuild this boat, learned all about naval architecture, which of course he ended up using for his career. And then they continued on and ultimately finished their circumnavigation. 5 years, had many other misadventures. Were going through the Suez Canal during the time period when there were still hostilities between the Egyptians and the Israelis. They faced gunboats. They faced all kinds of gear breakage. It was a pirate area. Some people they knew were taken in, kidnapped by pirates. They had their engine quit in Panama, and trying to get home, they were running out of food. They had their mast Equipment, a bunch of equipment broke. They were long overdue, and the family was panicking that they were sunk. They had an 86 nonstop passage back from Panama to San Francisco, and it's just a great story. This is just a couple of the highlights, but very harrowing experience in many respects, but inspiring story in many other respects as well. I am working away on it, just like my husband with his boat building. I continue to write just a little bit every day, and just like my last book, Tightwads on the Loose, a little bit every day. I take it to my writing group, go through it, tweak it, and over time a book materializes. And at some point I'll have something I feel really excited about, really proud of, and then I will share it with the world like I did Tightwads on the Loose. It's been a lot of fun to share our story from our 7 years, and the response has been just fantastic. It's doing very well, and people keep writing me letters saying how much they've enjoyed the book, and that just means a lot to me. I have a website, wendyhinman.com, and on that website I have a little bit of our blog from our story, sailing around the Pacific. I have a few tips and tricks for people who would love to do something like this. I have a whole schedule of the different presentations that I'm doing around the country. I am delighted to speak to all kinds of different groups to share our story, how we've set our goals, how we've followed our goals, and how to inspire other people to pursue whatever their dreams are and bring them to reality.